The van rumbled along the narrow forest road, its tires crunching against the gravel. The towering trees loomed on either side, their branches intertwining overhead, blocking out the fading light of the setting sun. 6 friends, Mark, Lisa, Jake, Emily, Sam, and Rachel, were on their way to a long-awaited camping trip deep in the heart of Blackwood National Forest. "This is gonna be amazing," Jake said, leaning back in his seat, stretching his arms behind his head. 3 days away from everything, no phones, no work, just the wild. Lisa, the most responsible of the group, unfolded a paper map. "The old ranger station should be close. We can park near it and set up camp. I still think it's weird there's no official camping area here anymore," Emily said, her fingers anxiously tapping on her knee. Sam smirked. "That's what makes it cool. Think about it, an abandoned ranger station. Feels like we're in a horror movie." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Let's not start with that." The road narrowed even further as they ventured deeper. The trees seemed closer now, as if the forest itself was pressing in on them. The air was thick and damp, filled with the scent of pine and decaying leaves. Then it happened. A shadow darted across the road, too fast to be fully seen. A blur of something pale, long-limbed, and unnatural. Mark slammed the brakes. "What the hell was that?" Lisa gasped, her hands gripping the dashboard. Silence. The van idled, its engine humming softly as they all peered out into the darkness. The headlights illuminated nothing but dense trees and tangled underbrush. "Probably just a deer," Jake muttered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Didn't look like a deer," Emily whispered. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was heavy, charged with unease. Then Mark exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Let's just keep moving." The van lurched forward again, but the laughter and excitement from earlier had faded. No one could shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ranger station was barely standing. The wooden structure was rotting, its roof sagging, and vines had begun reclaiming the walls. The windows were cracked, their glass long gone, leaving only dark, hollow spaces like empty eye sockets. Lisa shone a flashlight at a rusted sign near the entrance. The letters were faded, but still legible. Blackwood National Forest Ranger Station. Closed indefinitely. "That's not creepy at all," Rachel murmured. "Relax," Sam said. "We're not sleeping in there. Just camping nearby." The group set up their tents in a clearing a few yards away. As night fell, they gathered around a fire, its flickering flames casting long shadows on the trees. Lisa flipped through an old guidebook she had found inside the ranger station. So, apparently, this place used to be a big camping spot. But then, in the early 2000s, people started going missing. No bodies, no clues. Just, gone. "Okay, yeah, I take back what I said," Rachel muttered. "That's definitely creepy." A sharp snap echoed from the woods. Everyone froze. "Just the wind," Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. But then came another sound, a low, guttural noise. Something was out there. Watching. Waiting. And the night had only just begun. The fire crackled, its warmth doing little to ease the growing tension in the group. The forest stretched endlessly beyond the light, an ocean of blackness pressing in on them. Every so often, the wind would stir the branches, making them creak like old bones. Jake poked at the fire with a stick, forcing a grin. "So, anyone got ghost stories? You know, to set the mood." "Nope," Emily said quickly. "The mood is already bad enough." Lisa was still flipping through the guidebook she had found inside the ranger station. The pages were yellowed, damp at the edges, but some of the text was still legible. "This is weird," she murmured. "What?" Mark leaned in. She pointed at a passage. It talks about the missing people, but it also mentions sightings. People who camped here reported strange figures in the woods. Things that didn't move like animals. Some even described them as. A distant rustling cut her off. Everyone went still. The sound was deliberate, not the wind. Something moving through the underbrush. Rachel exhaled, forcing a laugh. Probably a raccoon. Then, from deeper in the forest, came another sound. A clicking noise, sharp and unnatural. Click. 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 A slow, rhythmic tapping, like bone against wood. Sam tightened his grip on the flashlight. Okay. What is that? No one had an answer. Lisa swallowed hard and closed the book. Maybe we should get some sleep, she said, her voice quieter now. We've got a long day of hiking tomorrow. It was an excuse, and they all knew it. But no one argued. The tents were zipped shut. The fire burned low. Emily lay awake, staring at the nylon ceiling above her, listening. The forest was alive with sounds, the distant hoot of an owl, the occasional rustle of leaves. But underneath it all, there was something else. The clicking. It was closer now. Click. 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 She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to ignore it. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. A branch snapped outside her tent. Her breath caught in her throat. Something was right there. She reached out, shaking Rachel awake. Rachel, she hissed. Rachel groaned. What? Listen. They both went silent. Outside, just beyond the thin layer of fabric, something exhaled, a slow, ragged breath. Then, the clicking sound came again. Click. 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 Rachel sat up, wide-eyed. Okay. That's not a raccoon. A shadow passed over their tent. Emily barely stopped herself from screaming. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the sound was gone. The clicking faded into the distance, swallowed by the night. Neither of them slept until the first light of dawn. And when they stepped outside their tent in the morning, they saw them. Footprints. Surrounding the camp. Deep, clawed imprints in the dirt. And whatever had made them, had been standing just inches from their tents. The morning sun filtered weakly through the canopy, casting long, jagged shadows over the campsite. But the light did nothing to dispel the lingering sense of dread. Emily and Rachel stood frozen, staring at the tracks in the dirt. Tell me someone was messing with us, Rachel whispered. Emily shook her head. I don't think so. The prints were wrong, too deep, too elongated. They weren't human. They weren't even like any animal she had ever seen. Each track had long, narrow toes ending in deep claw marks, as if something had dug into the earth with each step. And they weren't just scattered randomly. They circled the tents. As if something had been pacing. Watching. Mark was the next to step out of his tent, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Why are you guys? He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the tracks. What the hell? One by one, the others emerged, their sleepy expressions turning to confusion and then unease. Lisa crouched down, running a hand over one of the deeper prints. Too big for a wolf, she muttered. And they walk on all fours. These look bipedal. Meaning? Jake asked. Meaning it walks like us, Lisa said, standing up. Silence fell over the group. Sam forced a laugh, though it sounded forced. Alright, so some weirdo was messing with us. Maybe a hunter. Maybe some creep living in the woods. Rachel scoffed. A hunter? Barefoot, with clawed toes? Yeah, totally normal. You don't know what people are into, Sam shot back, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Mark exhaled sharply. Look, we're not going to freak out over some weird tracks. Let's just stick together today, do the hike like we planned, and stay close to camp tonight. Whatever it was, it's gone now. No one argued. But no one really believed it either. The hike was supposed to be the highlight of the trip. A trek up to Ridgepoint Lookout, where they'd have a full view of the entire Blackwood Forest. But the deeper they walked into the woods, the more uneasy everyone felt. The forest was too quiet. No birds. No rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just the sound of their own footsteps crunching over dead leaves. Emily kept glancing over her shoulder. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them. At one point, Lisa stopped and pointed at a tree. "Guys!" Everyone turned. The bark had deep scratches carved into it, long, jagged gashes, too high to be made by any normal animal. Jake ran a hand over them. "Something big did this." Rachel shivered. "I don't like this. Maybe we should head back." "Come on, we're almost at the lookout," Sam insisted. "Let's just get there, eat lunch, and go back before sunset." No one wanted to argue, but as they pressed on, the trees seemed to grow denser, the light dimming even though it was still midday. The air felt heavier, thick with something unspoken. Then came the smell. Rot. Like meat left out in the sun for too long. The stench hit them all at once, making Rachel gag. "Oh my God, what is that?" Emily spotted it first. There. Just off the trail, half hidden in the underbrush, lay the carcass of a deer. Or at least, what was left of it. Its ribcage was torn open, its flesh stripped to the bone. Its head was twisted unnaturally, almost completely backward. But the worst part wasn't the gore, it was the way the body was arranged. The bones had been placed in a pattern. A deliberate, unnatural spiral. "Jesus Christ," Mark muttered. "This isn't normal." Lisa took a step back. "Guys. I think we should leave. Now." A twig snapped. Somewhere, just beyond the trees. Too close. Too deliberate. Then came the clicking. Click. 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 The same noise from last night. Closer now. Echoing from multiple directions. Rachel grabbed Emily's arm. "Run." No one hesitated. They sprinted back down the trail, feet pounding against the earth, branches whipping at their faces. The clicking followed, keeping pace, moving through the trees with unnatural speed. Something was behind them. Something fast. Emily risked a glance over her shoulder, and saw it. A tall, twisted figure darting between the trees. Pale, emaciated skin stretched tight over an elongated body. Two long limbs, bent at unnatural angles. A head tilted too far to the side, like a broken doll. And the worst part, its face. Or rather, the lack of one. Hollow slits where eyes should be. A mouth stretched too wide, filled with jagged, uneven teeth. And those long fingers, ending in razor-sharp claws, tapping against tree trunks as it ran. Click. 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 "Go!" Jake shouted. The campsite came into view. They didn't stop running until they were inside the ranger station, slamming the door behind them. For a moment, nothing but ragged breathing. Then, outside the thin wooden walls. Click. 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 Something had followed them back. And it wasn't leaving. The air inside the abandoned ranger station was thick with dust and decay, but none of them cared. They pressed their backs against the walls, gasping for breath, hearts pounding like a drumbeat in their chests. Outside, the clicking noise was still there. Click. 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 Slow. Deliberate. Something was circling the cabin. Jake's hands were shaking as he locked the door. "Tell me someone else saw that thing." "I saw it," Emily whispered. "I wish I hadn't." Lisa pressed her ear against the door, listening. The sound of heavy, measured breathing filtered through the cracks. Whatever was outside wasn't leaving. Sam pulled out his hunting knife, the only weapon they had. "What is that thing?" Mark exhaled, trying to steady himself. "I don't know. But I do know that it wasn't human." They stood in silence, straining to hear. The clicking moved to the left side of the cabin. Then the right. Then. Thud. Something hit the wall hard. The entire station shuddered. Rachel yelped, clamping a hand over her mouth. Then, the whispering started. Faint at first, like wind slipping through the trees. But then it grew, low, guttural, a rasping voice that wasn't quite human. "We see you." Lisa's eyes widened in horror. "No. No, 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 that's not real. That's..." Another thud. Harder this time. The wood groaned under the pressure. The whispering stopped. Then came silence. The group held their breath. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but the clicking had stopped. The creature was gone. Or so they hoped. An hour passed. Maybe two. The fear was still there, a thick weight pressing down on them, but exhaustion was creeping in. Lisa, sitting on an overturned crate, ran a shaking hand through her hair. "We can't stay here forever," she murmured. Mark looked out the cracked window. The sky was darkening. "We don't have much choice. We can't run through the woods at night. If that thing's still out there." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Rachel curled her arms around her knees. "Why is this happening? What even is that thing?" Lisa hesitated. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the old guidebook. "I don't know if this means anything, but there's something in here about local legends." She flipped through the yellowed pages until she found what she was looking for. Here. The Blackwood Forest wasn't just a national park, it used to be a burial ground. A really old one. Sam frowned. "Like Native American?" Lisa shook her head. "Older than that. No one knows exactly who they were. Just that they vanished, and the only thing left behind were these weird carvings in the caves up north." Jake leaned over her shoulder. The page had a faded black and white photo of a stone tablet, covered in strange symbols. Lisa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "One of the last recorded campers who went missing left behind a journal. His last entry said he heard clicking noises at night. He described seeing something in the trees. He called it the Hollow Ones." A chill ran through the group. "The what?" Emily asked. Lisa swallowed hard. "According to the legend, they aren't ghosts. They aren't animals. They're something else. They don't just kill. They take. And once they see you," she hesitated. Mark frowned. "What?" Lisa's fingers tightened around the book. "They don't stop." A heavy silence settled over them. Then. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was dragging its claws along the wooden walls. Slow. Testing. The breath in Emily's throat hitched. "It's back." Rachel shook her head violently. "It never left." Outside, in the thick, endless black of the forest, the whispers started again. But this time, they were closer. "Come-ee-oot." The voice was no longer raspy. It was changing. Warping. It sounded like Lisa. The blood drained from her face. Then, before anyone could move, a hand slammed against the window. Pale. Long fingers. Pressing against the glass. And from the darkness beyond, something grinned at them. It had no eyes. But it was looking right at them. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The pale hand remained pressed against the window, long fingers splayed wide, the skin stretched too tight over protruding bones. The face behind it was barely visible, just a faint, grotesque outline in the darkness. But the grin, it was unmistakable. A mouth stretched far too wide, filled with rows of uneven, jagged teeth. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the thing tapped against the glass. Click. 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 Rachel was the first to break. She clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling a sob. Jake grabbed Lisa's arm, his grip so tight it hurt. The thing outside tilted its head. And then, it spoke. But it wasn't its voice. It was Emily's. "Let me in." Emily's stomach dropped. The voice was identical to hers, soft, trembling, pleading. But she hadn't spoken. "It's cold out here, please, open the door." Lisa gasped, shaking her head violently. "No. No, no, no. It can't do that. It can't." The thing knocked harder this time. A slow, rhythmic pounding that made the entire station tremble. Boom. 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 The glass shuddered. Cracks spread from where its fingers pressed. Mark backed away, voice low and urgent. "We have to get out of here." "There's nowhere to go," Jake hissed. "We leave, we're dead." "We stay, we're dead," Sam shot back. The thing outside dragged its claws down the window, producing a shrill, gut-wrenching screech. Then, it spoke again. "I see you." The voice shifted. It was Lisa's now. Lisa felt sick. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the guidebook. "We have to move," Mark said. "Now." Sam scanned the room, then pointed. "There's a back door." Rachel hesitated. "And what if there's more of them out there?" Silence. Then Lisa whispered, "We have to try." Mark crept toward the back of the station, motioning for the others to follow. His breath was shallow, his hands clammy. He reached for the rusted door handle and turned it as slowly as possible. It let out a low creak. Everyone flinched. The knocking at the front window stopped. For a single, excruciating moment, the entire forest was silent. Then, a screeching howl erupted from the thing outside. The sound was deafening, raw, filled with rage. Crash. The front window shattered inward. "Go!" Mark yelled. They bolted. The night swallowed them whole as they ran, branches whipping at their faces, the ground uneven beneath their feet. They had no direction, just away. The howls followed. But not just from behind them. From the sides. From ahead. From everywhere. Rachel sobbed as she ran. "There's more of them." Emily dared to look back. She immediately regretted it. Figures moved between the trees, twisted, unnatural shapes. Some crawled on all fours, their limbs bending in ways that should have been impossible. Others ran, their movements too fast, too smooth, like puppets on invisible strings. And their faces. No eyes. Just hollow slits. And mouths far too wide, grinning hungrily. Click. 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 The sound surrounded them. Lisa's foot caught on a root. She went down hard, pain jolting through her ankle. "Lisa!" Emily stopped, grabbing her. "Get up, get up." Lisa gasped, gripping her leg. I can't." The clicking grew louder. Sam skidded to a stop, turning back. Without hesitation, he hauled Lisa onto his back. "I've got you. Move." They ran. The trees thinned ahead, an opening. A way out. Then. The cabin. A decrepit wooden shack, half collapsed, swallowed by vines and rot. But it was something. Inside. Mark shouted. They barreled in, slamming the door behind them. Rachel collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Lisa winced as Sam set her down. Emily braced against the wall, her pulse hammering. Then. Something rushed past the cabin, its footsteps thundering. The walls shook. Another shrill, inhuman shriek split the night. Then silence. Shaking, Lisa pulled out the guidebook. She flipped frantically through the pages. Mark frowned. "What are you looking for?" Lisa swallowed hard. "A way to stop them." Her hands stopped on a page. A single phrase stood out, written in uneven, desperate handwriting. "They come when the sun goes down. They leave when the sun rises. But if they take you before dawn, you never come back." Lisa's throat went dry. Jake whispered, "How long till sunrise?" Mark checked his watch. 4 hours. 4 hours. 4 hours trapped in a rotting cabin. Surrounded. With no way out. And outside, the clicking started again. Click. 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 They were waiting. The air inside the cabin was thick with sweat, fear, and the smell of rotting wood. No one spoke. No one moved. Outside, the clicking noises continued, slow and deliberate. Click. 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 The creatures were circling the shack, their footsteps barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. But they were there. Watching. Waiting. Lisa clutched the old guidebook like a lifeline, her hands trembling as she scanned the page. "We just have to make it until dawn," she whispered. Mark rubbed his face, his breath uneven. "And if they come in before that?" No one answered. A loud thud made everyone jump. Something had landed on the roof. Rachel clapped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Jake whispered, "It's on top of us." A slow, dragging noise scraped across the ceiling, like claws raking against the wood. Dust rained down from the rafters. Then. A second thud. And another. The cabin groaned as more weight settled onto it. Emily's stomach twisted. "There's more than one." Lisa's breathing turned ragged. "They're trying to get in." Then. Knock. 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 A slow, rhythmic knocking against the door. Rachel squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head. "No, no, no." The knocking stopped. A voice whispered from the other side. "Let me in." Lisa's head snapped up. It was her own voice. The sound was perfect, every inflection, every breath. But it was hollow. Wrong. Emily grabbed Lisa's wrist, her grip tight. "Don't move. Don't listen." A shadow passed across the broken window. Something tall. Thin. Moving impossibly fast. Then, another whisper, this time in Rachel's voice. "Please. I'm hurt. Open the door." Rachel's hands curled into fists. "I hate this. I hate this." Sam glanced around the shack. "There's no way we're making it 4 hours if they break in." Lisa forced herself to focus. "There has to be a way to stop them. The book said they come out at night, but why?" Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "If they leave at sunrise, then they must be afraid of something." Lisa flipped back through the guidebook, scanning desperately. Emily pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. Fire? Jake checked his bag. I have a lighter. Lisa shook her head. No, fire alone won't stop them. There's something else keeping them back. Sam frowned. Then what the hell do we do? Another loud thud rattled the door. Then, slowly, the handle began to turn. Rachel screamed. Jake lunged forward, slamming his weight against the door. Help me hold it. Mark and Sam rushed over, pressing against the door as something pushed from the other side. The wood splintered. The door bulged inward. Lisa flipped a page, and her blood ran cold. There it was. A warning. They fear the sun. But they also fear their own reflection. Lisa's heart pounded. A mirror. Emily turned. What? Lisa held up the book. They don't have eyes, but they still see. If they look at their own reflection, it does something to them. Jake gritted his teeth, straining to keep the door shut. And where the hell do you see a mirror around here? Lisa's gaze snapped to a shattered picture frame on the floor. The glass inside was cracked, but still reflective. It's all we've got, she said, grabbing it. Emily caught on immediately. She snatched up another shard of glass, handing it to Rachel. Hold it up. If we're lucky, maybe they'll. The roof collapsed inward. Dust and splinters exploded as something huge dropped into the room. Rachel screamed as a long, twisted arm shot out of the debris, claws raking the air. The creature rose from the rubble, its head tilted unnaturally, bones popping as it turned to face them. It was worse up close. Its body was stretched, unnatural, like a human silhouette trapped in the wrong shape. The grin never changed. Rows of uneven, jagged teeth gleamed in the dark. And its fingers, too long, too sharp, curled toward them. Click. 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 Lisa thrust the mirror shard forward. The creature froze. Its head twitched violently. Its mouth stretched wider, as if in a silent scream. Lisa's voice shook. It's working. The creature lurched backward, claws scraping against the floor. Its entire body trembled, as if something was tearing it apart from the inside. The clicking turned to a horrible, high-pitched screeching. Then it ran. The creature scrambled up the broken wall, its movements frenzied and unnatural. In seconds, it was gone, vanishing into the tree line. The clicking noises outside changed. Scattered. Confused. Then, silence. Jake was the first to speak. What the hell just happened? Lisa stared at the glass shard, still shaking. They saw themselves. Emily swallowed hard. And they didn't like it. For the first time since the nightmare started. The creatures were retreating. Mark wiped sweat from his brow. I don't know how long that'll last. Lisa tightened her grip on the glass. Then we need more mirrors. Because dawn was still hours away. And they weren't safe yet. The wind howled through the shattered roof of the cabin, scattering dust and dead leaves across the floor. The air was thick with the scent of rot, sweat, and fear. Outside, the clicking had stopped. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was worse. Lisa clutched the broken mirror shard, her knuckles white. We scared them off. But not for long. Mark paced near the doorway, his jaw clenched. Then we use what works. We need more mirrors. Jake shook his head. You think this place just has extra mirrors lying around? We're in the middle of nowhere. Lisa ignored him and scanned the room. The shack had been abandoned for years, most of its furniture had rotted into useless heaps. But in the far corner, something glinted in the moonlight. A rusted metal sheet, half buried beneath debris. Lisa rushed over, yanking it free. The surface was corroded and stained, but still reflective enough to catch the light. Emily helped her lift it. This could work. Sam grabbed a rusted knife, turning it over. This, too. Anything with a reflection. Rachel wiped at her face, struggling to steady her breathing. Do we just hold them up if they come back? Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. No. We can't just wait for them. We need to trap them. Jake narrowed his eyes. And how the hell do we do that? Lisa exhaled slowly, flipping through the tattered guidebook. There had to be something, some way to keep them out until sunrise. Then, she saw it. Her breath caught in her throat. A single line, written in faded ink. They cannot cross the barrier of their own reflection. Lisa's eyes widened. We don't just hold the mirrors. She looked up at the others. We use them to block the entrances. Emily caught on fast. If they see themselves when they try to come in. They won't come in, Lisa finished. Mark nodded. Then we board up the windows. The doors. Everything. Rachel looked doubtful. And if it doesn't work? Lisa met her gaze. We die. No one argued. The barricade. They worked fast. Jake and Mark pried loose wooden planks from the broken furniture, using them to reinforce the doors. Lisa and Emily placed every reflective surface they could find against the weak spots, metal scraps, broken glass, even the screens of their dead phones. Sam drove nails into the window frames, hanging shards of mirror like makeshift wind chimes. They swung in the breeze, catching the moonlight. Rachel wiped sweat from her brow. It's not perfect, but it's something. Lisa checked her watch. 3 more hours until sunrise. Now we wait, Mark muttered. And pray it holds. The siege. The first attack came just after 3 a.m. The clicking returned, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin like sharks scenting blood. Click. 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 Rachel whimpered, curling into herself. Jake gripped a metal pipe, his muscles tense. Then. A thud against the door. Then another. Something heavy slammed against the wood, hard enough to rattle the entire structure. Lisa pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. A deep, guttural snarl vibrated through the air. Then, silence. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then. A sharp hiss. The door handle rattled violently, turning, twisting, trying to open. Mark clenched his fists. It's testing the barricade. Then. A different sound. Not snarling. Not clicking. Laughter. Soft. Mocking. Rachel's eyes widened in horror. It's laughing at us. Lisa's stomach turned. No, it wasn't just laughing. It was mimicking them. The laughter shifted, cycling through their voices, one by one. Emily's nervous giggle. Jake's deep chuckle. Lisa's breathless laugh from earlier that day. Then. It stopped. And whispered. You can't hide forever. The voice was Mark's. Lisa gritted her teeth. Screw you. Then. A scream. Not from inside. From outside. One of the creatures let out a shriek, a horrible, choking sound, like something was tearing itself apart. The others joined in, their howls turning into a frantic, discordant wail. Emily clapped her hands over her ears. What's happening? Lisa ran to the window, peeking through a crack in the boards. She sucked in a breath. The creatures were writhing, backs arching, limbs twisting in unnatural ways. Their heads snapped side to side, as if something was inside them, pulling at their bones. Then. One by one. They began to retreat. Lisa gasped. It's working. Emily ran to her side. What is? Lisa pointed. The wind had shifted, and the first light of dawn was beginning to creep through the trees. The creatures screeched, retreating further into the forest. Their skin boiled in the pale light, their movements turning erratic, desperate. Then, in a blur of shadow and smoke, they were gone. Silence fell. The group stood frozen, barely able to process what just happened. Then, Jake collapsed onto the floor, laughing hysterically. Rachel burst into tears. Lisa just stood there, staring at the place where the creatures had been. Mark finally spoke, his voice hoarse. We made it. Lisa turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. For now. Because even as the first golden rays of sunlight broke through the trees, she knew the truth. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning sun bled through the trees, golden light cutting across the ruined cabin. Smoke curled from the splintered roof where the creatures had broken through. But the forest was silent. The clicking was gone. The laughter, the whispers, the shadows, all vanished with the night. Lisa leaned against the cabin wall, her legs trembling. She could still feel the weight of the creatures' eyes on her, even though they were gone. Or at least, she thought they were. The aftermath. Jake sat on the floor, his head in his hands. We should be dead. Emily exhaled, her breath shaky. But we aren't. Rachel wiped at her swollen eyes. It's over, right? No one answered. Lisa didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe that sunrise had ended it, that the creatures had burned away with the night. But something in her gut told her the truth. They weren't gone. Just waiting. The walk back. They left the cabin as soon as the sun was high. No one spoke. No one looked back. Lisa carried the guidebook, clutching it like a Bible. It had saved them once. It might save them again. They moved quickly, their boots crunching over dry leaves, the only sound in the empty forest. Hours passed. The road came into view, a thin, winding strip of pavement cutting through the trees. Jake let out a weak laugh. Holy crap. We made it. Rachel almost collapsed in relief. We just need to. Then. Lisa froze. Something wasn't right. The road was empty. But the forest behind them. It was too quiet. No birds. No wind. No life. Lisa turned, staring into the trees. And then. She saw it. Far, far in the distance. Just beyond the tree line. A shape. Tall. Wrong. Waiting. Its mouth was still grinning. And then, it lifted a hand. And waved. Lisa's stomach dropped. Her mouth went dry. They're still watching us. Emily followed her gaze, and her breath hitched. Then Rachel. Then Jake. Then Mark. No one spoke. The group turned back toward the road. They didn't run. They didn't scream. They just walked away. Because they all understood one thing. The creatures weren't trapped in the forest. They could leave whenever they wanted. They let them go. This time. And next time. Lisa knew they wouldn't be so lucky.